Genshin Impact is changing faster than you might expect. With endgame content becoming harder every patch and new characters constantly reshaping team structures, the meta is shifting at an insane pace. Characters that were considered must-pulls just a few versions ago are now no longer recommended, and even after all these changes, some characters still remain completely useless. So today, we're going to go through the best characters from each element so you can decide which units are actually worth pulling for your account. Let's start right away, so you don't skip. Starting with our first element, Anemo. Right now, Sucrose is looking like the best Anemo character in the entire game. The reason is simple: the sheer amount of value she provides. She can hold Thrilling Tales and the Viridescent Veneraire set, which alone already makes her insanely strong. On top of that, she provides massive elemental mastery buffs to your DPS. You can play her in hyper carry teams with DPS characters like Flins or Mavuika, where she provides huge EM buffs and resistance shred. She also works extremely well with Ineffa. Even if you are not running Thrilling Tales or Viridescent Veneraire, her raw elemental mastery alone are strong enough to keep her among the best options. What makes Sucrose even better is that she does not require constellations, unlike many other 4-star units. She also became stronger after the introduction of Hexen Zirkel buffs, where she provides additional utility and helps unlock Hexen Zirkel synergies for characters like Durin and Fischl. If you want similar buffs but with a defensive option, Lanyon is an excellent alternative. Currently, she provides one of the strongest shields in the game, while still being able to hold Thrilling Tales and Viridescent Veneraire. She is especially valuable in teams that run without a healer, such as taser teams or DPS characters like Arlecchino, where a strong shield is preferred. Because of this, Lanyon is one of the best Anemo supports right now. Another strong option is Yehoda. She is a defensive Anemo unit who can provide elemental mastery from her kit and also run the Silken Moon set, especially when paired with Nefer to activate Ascendant Gleam buffs. Yehoda is one of the most unique Anemo units in the game because she can function as an off-field elemental applier. For example, she can act as a Hydro applier in Nefer or Flins teams by infusing her field with Hydro. Unlike Sucrose or Lanyon, Yehoda scales extremely well with constellations. Her C6 is one of the strongest constellations in the game, providing 5% crit rate and 40% crit damage. Among constellation-dependent units, characters like Ineffa, Hazo, and Pharazon become incredibly strong at C6. Ineffa is one of the best 4-star Anemo DPS characters at higher constellations, and one of the only 4-star DPS units that can genuinely clear endgame content. Pharazon remains the best support for any Anemo DPS, thanks to Anemo resistance reduction from her burst and her massive C6 buffs. As for 5-star Anemo units, there are currently no truly broken options. Kazuha is still a very strong support for older DPS characters that scale with damage bonuses, but his usage rate has dropped after the introduction of the Cinder City set and Xilonen. Standard units like Jean and Mizuki are still decent, but after the release of Yehoda and Lanyon, they are no longer recommended to build. For Anemo DPS, Venti is currently the strongest option, at least until the release of Varka, which is expected to finally bring Anemo back into relevance. And honestly, Anemo desperately needs more strong 5-star units. So with that, here is my Anemo tier list. Now, moving on to Geo. Currently, Xilonen is the best Geo support in the game. What makes her so broken is how easy she is to play. Her entire rotation takes just a few inputs, and with that, she provides 36% resistance shred along with additional buffs depending on the artifact set you use. She can also heal the team with her burst, which allows her to fill the sustenance role as well. Being a Notlon character, she synergizes extremely well with Notlon teams, making her the best overall support for them. Outside of Notlon teams, she still works with almost every team in the game. She's also one of the most beginner-friendly characters available. She performs nearly the same, even with level 1 artifacts and random weapons. Alongside her, the upcoming duo of Zabai and Iluga is looking extremely strong. Zabai is the first real Geo main DPS we've had in almost 2 years and introduces lunar crystallization to the element. She's shaping up to be one of the strongest DPS characters in the game and one of the most free-to-play friendly. Weapons like Harbinger of Dawn are incredibly strong on her, and since she scales with defense and elemental mastery, her artifact requirements are very easy to meet. Iluga, releasing alongside her, is one of her best supports, providing additional defense and elemental mastery. At C6, Iluga becomes almost as impactful as Columbina for Zabai. Currently, Zabai is the only Geo DPS that truly looks viable in the meta. Units like Navia can be played in lunar crystallization teams with Columbina and perform decently, but most of those teams feel heavily carried. Outside of Zabai teams, Geo options like Goro and Zhongli are still decent, but realistically, the main reason to build them now is to support Zabai. Alabedo has gained new relevance thanks to being a Hexen Zircle unit. He can provide team-wide buffs and elemental mastery through his passive, and works well in multiple duo setups. He can be paired with Mona or Durin, used with Milani, or even slotted into mono Pyro teams with Durin and DPS characters like Arlecchino or Mavuika. Outside of these specific cases, many Geo units are simply underperforming. Units like Kachina, who can hold the Cinder City set, end up being more useful than most Geo supports. That alone shows how much Geo as an element is struggling right now. Here is my Geo tier list. Now, moving on to the next element, Electro. Electro is currently one of the most used elements in the game, thanks to how versatile its characters are. 4-star units like Fischl and Kuki are still among the best Electro characters available. Kuki is the only Electro healer in the game, and scales with elemental mastery, which makes her incredibly strong in Hyperbloom teams. Fischl, who was already the best off-field Electro unit, has become even stronger thanks to Hexen Zircle buffs, as she can now provide elemental mastery for Electro charged and Lunar charged teams, and attack percent for Overload teams, making her insanely broken. Other 4-star Electro units are also extremely strong. Auroron is one of the strongest off-field DPS characters in Electro-charged teams and can rival 5-star damage at higher constellations. Yansan is the best alternative to Bennett and actually outperforms him at C6. She is incredibly strong, especially when paired with Notlon units, though her main downside is that her buffs drop significantly if you stop moving. When it comes to 5-star Electro characters, Ineffa is currently the strongest Electro unit in the game. She deals more damage than Fischl, provides an insanely strong shield, and applies Electro off-field. You can think of her as a fusion of Kuki and Fischl, which alone shows how broken she is in the current meta. She also created an entirely new team archetype called Overvape due to how strong she is, especially in Arlecchino teams where permanent shielding is extremely valuable. Her best team is with Flins, followed by Hyperbloom teams with Columbina and Lauma. We've already made multiple videos covering Ineffa in detail, so make sure to check those out. For DPS characters, Flint's paired with Ineffa is currently the strongest Electro DPS setup in the game. Whether you run his premium teams with Columbina and Ineffa, or free-to-play setups with Fischl and Sucrose, his damage is insane. His only downside is that he is locked into Electro-charged teams unlike other Electro DPS units. Varesa is the second best Electro DPS and the most versatile one. She works extremely well in Electro-charged teams with Farina and Overload teams with Chevreuse, making her a very flexible and powerful option. Outside of these two DPS characters, most other Electro DPS units are not recommended, although they can still clear content when heavily supported by Ineffa and Columbina. With that said, here is my Electro tier list. Now moving on to Dendro, this element has had a complete roller coaster ride. When it was first introduced, it completely reshaped the reaction system, then slowly fell out of focus during Fontaine and Notlon, and is now back at the top again thanks to nod-krai. Don't be surprised if it fades again in future regions, especially with the game shifting toward Cryo. Lauma is currently the best Dendro character in the game. She is so strong that she can single-handedly cover all your Dendro needs. You can play her as a support with Silken Moon for Nefer teams, as a Dendro applier in Hyperbloom teams, or as a Deepwood and Thrilling Tales holder in Kinich teams. Thanks to her additional 25% Dendro resistance shred, she is absolutely insane and a must-pull for almost every account. She completely power-crept Nahida, being around 30% stronger in Hyperbloom teams and even better in Burning teams with Kinich. This does not mean Nahida is bad. She is still very strong, but Lauma is simply on another level. You can even run Nahida and Lauma together, where they buff each other and form one of the strongest Dendro duos in the game. Lauma's strongest synergy is with Nefer, where she is by far Nefer's best support. Nefer herself is currently the best Dendro DPS and one of the strongest DPS units in the entire game. Her main limitation is team building, since she only functions in bloom-based setups, but her damage ceiling is incredibly high, especially after Columbina. Kinich is the second best Dendro DPS and plays completely differently. He prefers burning and burgeon setups and scales heavily from attack and damage bonus rather than elemental mastery. His best teams include Pyro units like Bennett and Mavuika. Thanks to the new Silken Moon set, Dendro teams have received massive buffs, making almost every Dendro unit usable again. Even characters like Kaveh can perform extremely well with Nilou and Lauma. Yao Yao and Baizhu remain the only Dendro healers in the game, which makes them extremely valuable, especially in Nefer teams where sustain is mandatory. With that, here is my Dendro tier list.
Next, we move on to Hydro, which is arguably the strongest and most used element in the game. Hydro has powerful reactions with almost every element, and with nod-krai and Lunar reactions, it has become even more important. Columbina is easily the best Hydro character in the game right now. She provides massive buffs and amplifies Lunar reactions to a level that reshapes the entire meta. She is the strongest Lunar unit and one of the most impactful characters ever released. Her best teams are with nod-krai DPS units, but she can also work with non-nod-krai teams as long as you activate Ascendant Gleam. We've already made a dedicated video on Columbina, so make sure to check that out. Anemo is the only real alternative to Columbina, which makes her extremely valuable when you're running multiple nod-krai teams. Supports like Xilonen and Farina, who were historically the best Hydro units, are still strong, but they have fallen off in Lunar teams since damage bonus does not benefit Lunar reactions as much. Among 4-star units, Xingqiu is still one of the best characters in the entire game, thanks to his insane Hydro application. While his off-field damage has fallen compared to modern units, his utility is still unmatched. Other strong Hydro units include Candace, who is one of the best supports for Arlecchino, and Dahlia, the only Hydro shielder in the game, which makes her extremely valuable with Skirk for sustain and attack speed. For Hydro DPS characters, Morlani is currently the best option, thanks to her synergy with Durin and Mavuika. Nuvalet has fallen significantly since the last tier list, but he can still clear content. His traditional hyper-carry teams are no longer recommended, and he now works best as a Hydro applier in Hyper-Bloom teams with Ineffa and Lauma, or Burgeon teams with Durin and Lauma. With that, here is my Hydro tier list. Now moving on to Pyro, arguably the most loved and consistently powerful element in the game. Mavuika is currently the most valuable Pyro character and arguably the strongest unit in the entire game. She can function as a DPS, support, buffer, and Pyro applicator all at once. She works in Melt, Vape, Mono Pyro, and even Hybrid teams with Durin perfectly fine. Arlecchino is the second best Pyro DPS. Her strongest teams are overload setups with Durin and overvape teams with Ineffa, but her personal damage is still lower than Mavuika. Durin is the best Pyro support in the game and works in almost every team. He becomes even more broken with Hexenzirkel buffs, and we've covered him extensively in previous videos. Among 4-star Pyro units, Bennett remains one of the best supports ever created, while Gaming is the best 4-star DPS in the game. Xiangling is still the best off-field Pyro applicator, and Toma is extremely valuable in Burgeon and Burning teams. We also cannot forget Chevros, who completely reshaped Overload teams and becomes absolutely broken at C6. With that, here is my Pyro tier list. Finally, we come to Cryo. Despite being home to some of the strongest characters, Cryo as an element has always struggled to find a stable identity. Escoffier brought Freeze back into relevance, but with nod-krai enemies and newer endgame content, Freeze once again struggles. That said, Skirk and Escoffier are still some of the most broken units in the game and can brute force a lot of content. Citlali is the best melt support in the game, and one of the best options for Mavuika and Arlecchino. Outside of these three characters, Cryo currently has very few units worth investing into. The element desperately needs a rework, and that rework might come sooner than expected as we move into the final arc of Genshin Impact. With that, here is my Cryo tier list. I hope this breakdown helped you decide which characters are actually worth pulling for your account. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to check out the other tier lists and guides on the channel. Until next time.